morning, everyone. First of all, Lucia and Ikle, thank you very much for inviting me today to introduce to you all the story of Open Lab and Just Transitions. So as Lucia already mentioned, my name is Sina Schepers. I work as a strategic manager at the city of Genk since November 2021. My background actually is in the social sciences. I hold a PhD in participatory processes, but currently I work at the Department of Environment and Sustainable Development. So just to give you an idea what the city of Genk is, what the city of Genk is about. It's a city located in the northeast of Belgium, indeed in the Flemish region, as Lucia mentioned. It's a former mining city, and over 66,000 people live in Genk, spread out over an area of about 78 square kilometers, 78,000 square kilometers. For the city, the Open Lab project, which I will talk about today, is a leverage project in our ambition to tackle the climate targets for 2030, which is the reduction of CO2 emissions by 40%. And during this conversation, I want to talk to you about how Open Lab, so the project, but also the city of Genk in general, how we try to serve just transition. And that means how we try to address energy poverty, how we try to include and empower vulnerable groups without cutting down on technological and business-related innovations and achievements. First, I want to give you a quick idea of what the Open Lab project is about. So Open Lab is a EU-funded Horizon 2020 project, and its goal is to lead the transition to positive energy neighborhoods in Tartu, which is in Estonia. Pamplona, I saw that one of the participants today will also work in Pamplona soon, in Spain, and Genk, Belgium. The project is coordinated by VITO, which is the Flemish Institute for Technological Research, and 32 partners from 7 countries are working together in the project to sort of revitalize urban areas across Europe and lead a transition to positive energy neighborhoods. Simplistically summarized, these are neighborhoods that share and produce more energy than they consume, which is really short and simplistic summarized. And over the course of 4.5 years, Open Lab focuses on identifying, but also demonstrating replicable and commercially viable solution packages that enable these positive energy buildings and neighborhoods. So engaging with those neighborhoods, engaging with communities in those neighborhoods in creating these positive energy neighborhoods is crucial to achieving this goal of Open Lab, we feel, and therefore we apply a whole scala of participatory approaches and methods along the way. So in each of the participating Open Lab countries, a so-called living lab is set up, and a living lab is a place where different stakeholders collaborate on innovative solutions, but in a real-life setting. And the Living Lab in Genk is located in 2 neighborhoods in Genk, in Waterschei and New Texas. Waterschei is a so-called garden city, which is a former mining district built in the 1920s. And in Waterschei, we work together with Stable, which is a local energy service organization that provides support to private homeowners. New Texas, on the other hand, is a social housing estate built in the 1990s. And in New Texas, we work together with Wonen in Limburg, which is a local social housing company. And there we collaborate mainly with tenants from social houses. So in the Living Lab in Genk, we partake in a number of activities for the development of a positive energy neighborhood, including the transformation of 33 houses into energy positive buildings through a collective renovation concept, and also through the creation of a collective neighborhood infrastructure where the sharing of energy in a neighborhood and the creation of a local energy community can become very concrete. One of the research questions that is central to the Open Lab project, but also to our daily workings at the city of Genk, is how to make the transition, the energy transition, but also the transition to PENS, as equitable as possible, as just as possible. We see the energy transition as one that leaves no one behind. Iedereen mee, as we say in Dutch. And as you can see, there is quite a high percentage of people that simply cannot participate in the transition. And so we believe in an equitable distribution of the benefits and costs of the transition, where inequalities are reduced rather than increased. And so this means that we put a lot of time and effort in addressing energy poverty, including and empowering vulnerable groups and addressing social and economic aspects besides the technological and business model aspects as well. And so, in short, we are doing our very best to make this transition as inclusive, as human-centered as possible. And in the following slides, I will elaborate a bit on the learning lessons we have learned from shaping this transition that is hopefully as just as possible from the perspective of a local government, from the perspective of the city of Genk. Well, the first learning lesson is that transitions can be done alone. As a local government, we will acknowledge the importance of coalitions with go-betweens that are present in the neighborhood. In Dutch, we call these persons bridge figures, literally translated, so brugfiguren, because they allow us to bridge the gap between a local government and citizens. And so in Open Lab, we are very lucky to rely on our project partners, especially from Wonen in Limburg and Stebo, as I mentioned, but also our community workers and our city local governments as neighborhood managers, as they are called here in Genk. Really, these go-betweens, these bridge persons, much more as we are able to connect with a community, to gain their trust, to be they are established figures in the neighborhood, the face of a neighborhood often, and engaging, they engage with groups of citizens that are way harder to reach for a local government. So in our view, these persons allow for a much more inclusive transition in our view. Besides go-betweens, we feel that a just transition requires particular types of actors that take on different roles. So not the familiar innovation managers, networkers, but a diversity of transition-related roles such as connectors and destabilizers. And in our view, this means that we need to look differently at our own role as a local government. So in general, there are two main roles a local government can play in relation to transition, we feel: a pulling role or a more pushing role. And the pulling role here is a, classic role of a government that starts rolling out policies from previously conceived policy plans. But we feel that for transition, it is important for a government to also start looking at a more pushing role. So a role of a government that looks very closely to the dynamics that are emerging in society and contributes to the speed of transition, understand those dynamics very well, and then support those dynamics by giving them regulatory frameworks, adapting legislation if it's needed, and creating space for these things to become stronger. Well, we all know that it's easier said than done, of course. Here at the city of Genk, we know the theory. We have a view of what role we want to take on as government. But in practice, we often fall back into known roles that contribute little or nothing to a transition, let alone a just transition. So that's definitely a challenge that we are struggling with and are quite aware of ourselves as well. Well, a second learning lesson that we can formulate based on the participatory approach of Open Lab is the added value of community building. So from the beginning of the project through conversations with participants, just sitting down with them, having a cup of coffee, simply engaging with them, we noticed that there was a strong need among citizens for a sense of community, for being part of this network of neighbors. So based on this, in addition to the regular project activities, we decided to engage in things like organizing neighborhood parties or getting together for nothing more than a chat and a cup of coffee. And this may sound a bit, I don't know, a bit silly, but we saw that over time, citizens themselves began to take on increasingly active roles in organizing such activities. So for us as a local government, this meant reaching out to a growing community that has, well, previously not seemed easy to reach. Now, engaging with citizens or project partners in this way, and as we do in Open Lab, it's not always straightforward or evident for a local government. We are a large, unwieldy organization, and so we often move at a different speed than project partners or citizens. For instance, the more technically oriented project partners, they want to start working with new innovative technologies way faster than our administrative procedures allow. And the same goes for citizens who, for instance, want to get started or on renovating their homes, but then have to undergo lengthy procedures for permits. So also, in addition, the context of a local government, of course, it does not guarantee or allow for a long-term stability and security, because every 6 years the legislature changes and structures or systems may take on different forms or be overturned. So we know that the character or simply being a local government and the way that things work here are challenging when looking at a transition or just transition. Well, nevertheless, as a local government, we try to do our bit for a just transition. And one of the ways we try to do so is by adopting an inclusive and accessible participation and community strategy. This means, among other things, that we communicate in different ways. For instance, by distributing newsletters that are digital, but also physical, printed out, paper newsletters. We also find that repetition is important, especially in complex matters such as energy-related technologies or PANs. We also try to keep our communication as accessible as possible by having one-on-one conversations, doing home visits, having informal ways of communicating. As I mentioned, just by simply sitting down with people around a table, having a drink, having a cup of coffee together and talking about energy. We also experiment with more tangible languages that are not purely textual, because not all of our participants are comfortable with the Dutch language. And we also set up Karekiet 10, we call it. It's sort of it's become our home base. We provided a physical place in the new Texas neighborhood, a home base, as it were, where there's regular permanence and citizens can just walk in to speak to one of the project partners whenever they like, at times that suit them instead of that suit us. Well, a final reflection I would like to end this presentation with is the importance of giving a place to emotions, to the human aspect of the transition. So the participants in Open Lab mostly live in energy poverty. They often have financial worries or concerns of other kinds. So renovating their homes is not always on top of mind for them. We also had to tell some of the people that they cannot participate in the Open Lab project while their neighbors were selected, for instance, because the project funding does not allow it. So to achieve a just transition, it is important that emotions have a place in this story, that it is okay for them to be disappointed that they were not able to participate or cannot participate in transition, and that's okay too. So we feel that this human aspect needs to have a place alongside technological innovation or energetic high-tech features as well. And we noticed that for our project partners like Stebo and Moon and Limburg, they have a much more closer relationship to their involved residents, because it's more evident for them than for us as a local government. They're much more connected to the neighborhood, much more connected to the residents, and so their access there is for them much more easily. And we know that this is definitely a challenge where we still have to work on as a government to also make this room for this aspect of a transition in the context of a local government. And we have to find ways to do so, we feel. I think that were my 50 minutes of fame. So I want to end my presentation with this. These were just some learning lessons and some challenges that we have gathered through the first 2-3 years of Open Lab. I hope you got a bit of insight into what we do from what we do within the Open Lab project, but also within the city of Genk around just transitions. And I would love to hear from you whether you can identify with our learning lessons, whether you have similar or different experiences. Yeah, well, I would like to invite you to ask questions or discuss this topic together. So yeah, thank you for your attention and let's hear from you guys.